There's an interesting phenomenon in church life that has its foundation in goodness, but it tends to get skewed toward moral obligation. It's this concept of serving others to the point of burnout. The underlying belief goes something like this: as long as I serve others by constantly giving of myself, I will be a good Christian. And if I'm a good Christian, I will have a sense of belonging and be known as a dedicated and hard worker. This is the way to work myself to a sense of worthiness. Now, I know this way of being so well. I was trained up in it in my family of origin, and my belief went something like this: as long as I am a good and helpful daughter, I will be loved. It's a conditional love, isn't it? It depends on me doing something in order to receive that love. And that limiting belief then extended out to my participation in church. As long as I'm a good and helpful pastor, I will be loved. Now, with some of my colleagues, it goes even further. As long as I sacrifice myself for the church, I will be deemed worthy of love and respect. Now, sometimes pastors get together, and it's like we get out all of our wounds and we just place them in the middle of the room. I remember one pastor in a gathering trumping everyone else in the room by saying this: well, I've had to sleep in my church some nights because I have so much work to do. I can't afford the time it takes to go home. I don't know, I just wouldn't want to be a member of that church. I don't know. Maybe you can recognize yourself in some similar pattern that connects doing or rescuing or serving with a sense of worthiness. In order to be worthy of love and belonging, I have to do certain things. And unfortunately, when it comes from that place, that doing becomes more of a chore than anything born out of joy. And the truth is that this limiting belief is a heavy burden to carry. It's exhausting. Because what happens is we end up feeling frustrated and unappreciated. What we thought we were doing with our best intentions turns out to be emotionally depleting and filled with a sense of dread. Have you ever felt that way? I certainly have. The poet Hafiz uncovers our secret as human beings. He says this: admit something. Everyone you see, you say to them, love me, love me, love me. Of course, you don't say this out loud. Otherwise, someone would call the cops. Still think about this great pull in us to connect. Now, connection is hardwired in us as human beings. Feeling lonely and isolated actually leads to our demise and our ultimate death. They've actually done studies on this. So this unconsciously, will you love me? What do I have to do to get you to love me? Really is a natural part of being human beings. But the focus is on outside of ourselves. What do I need to do to get you to love me? But the truth is that God already loves us and accepts us. There is nothing we have to do to receive that love. That part that we neglected is that love towards ourselves. Jesus tells us the most important commandment is to love God and to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. Now, in my younger years, I interpreted this as the way to love God is through loving and serving others. But listen, he says, love our neighbor as we love ourselves. What comes first? Loving ourselves. In the reading from John's Gospel today, Jesus reminds his closest friends before he dies. He says this, "As God has loved me, so I have loved you. So abide in my love." See what he says? I have been enveloped and held in God's love. And I want you to have that same experience. And then he goes on and he says, "I have said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and your joy complete." Notice he doesn't say this, "Work yourselves into the ground. You have a big mission to fulfill when I'm gone, you'll be rewarded by how much work you do on my behalf. The amount of love you receive will be equal to the amount of love you give. So go out there and get to work. It's all up to you." Have you ever read that in the Gospels? So how do we do this? How do we balance our call to service, which is a beautiful thing about all of you gathered here today? How do we balance that with this abiding in love? Now, I think that Jesus is being very clear here. He says that love comes first. It's a tender kind of love, and it's a love directed towards us, as if we are holding the most vulnerable parts of who we are with love. It's a kind of cherishing of all of who we are, even the parts that we want to hide. And once we allow ourselves to experience this tenderness, we no longer feel separated. It is a love born from within that doesn't depend on the actions of others. And there's such a sense of freedom in this resting in that cherishing of our whole selves. And once we let that love in, joy emerges. Love is the foundation to joy. And joy can be the doorway to love. Jesus puts these two together. So I want to try a little experiment right now. If you feel comfortable, I invite you to close your eyes. And I want you to think about someone or something that brings you joy. Get that picture in your mind's eye. And what do you notice in your body when that joy comes upon you? Maybe you want to turn your mouth into a smile. Maybe there's a sense of lightness or an opening in your heart. Maybe you can feel a sense of love blossoming within that joy. Now, still with eyes closed, take another deep breath and think about someone or something that you love. And allow that image to expand in your mind's eye. And then turn that love towards you. Allow love to cherish you. Allow love to tenderly be with the parts of you that hurt. Maybe there's a sense of relaxing in your body or a sense of safety. Maybe there's another tender smile that wants to blossom on your face. Maybe you can feel a sense of joy blossoming within that love. Now I invite you to continue to keep your eyes closed and allow this love and this joy to take up residence in your body, in your heart. And imagine that you're floating in this love. You're soaking in this love. And this love says to you, oh, beautiful child of God, there's nothing you have to do in order to receive this love, because it's your birthright, and no one can take it away from you. You are so loved, and you always have been, and you always will be. Just rest in this beautiful love. Now, there might be a part of you right now that's squirming, that wants to say, but you don't know me, love. You don't know the mistakes I've made. You don't know the nasty thoughts that I harbor. You don't know how judgmental I can be. Just allow that voice to take a walk outside in the rain right now. And then come back to feeling that feeling of being held in love, abiding in that love. And still with eyes closed, I want you to ponder these questions. What would it be like to allow this love to find its home in you and to guide you in your life? What would it be like to follow that joy? And how would your quality of serving others be different? And before you open your eyes, I just invite you to remember this feeling of abiding love in your body. Because this is what Jesus invited his disciples to feel. It was his last words of wisdom to them. And then you can open your eyes. Jesus practiced this way of abiding love. When he was alive, how many times in the Gospels do we read that he went away to spend time with God? It was exactly this love that allowed him to lay down his life. His love was so big that even death couldn't hold it back. He went to the cross not out of a sense of duty, but this overflowing sense of love. Jesus goes on to say in this passage that when we abide in this way, we become friends. It's this kind of love that connects us. Because there's nothing we need the other to do in order for us to feel loved, because we're already filled up with it. It is abiding in this way that we discover that there's no insiders or outsiders, There's no greater or lesser. There's no separation or division. There's only love. And that's our home. So every person we meet becomes a friend because Christ resides in that abiding love within each one of us. This is the way that service becomes a dance of joy. Our service is born out of this joy of friendship and connection, and not out of obligation or dread. Do you see the difference? Jesus is actually giving us a blueprint on how to be in this world, a kind of service that's born out of this love. And for me, it comes down to 3 basic questions. Asking ourselves, what will bring my heart of love a sense of joy? Dear heart, what will bring you joy today? And then the second question, what is love asking me to do in this moment? Love asking me to do in this moment. Third question, how can that joy be shared with others? Jesus is inviting us to trust in this kind of abiding. Again, he says, I've said these things to you so that my joy may be in you and your joy complete. There's a beautiful song, old song that we sing, blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. The fellowship of kindred friends is like to that above. So let us, as a community of friends, begin with abiding in this beautiful love that is ours. And trust that when we abide there, beauty and goodness unfold in this world. Amen.